This is the Aftermarket Radio Network.
Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of Diagnosing the Aftermarket, A to Z with Matt Fonslow. I am Matt Fonslow, and I am very, very excited to welcome to the podcast a guest, a shop owner out of Colorado, who really I only know through social media, primarily. And I've read a lot of his posts in various pages and groups, and I just find them very intriguing. I agree with a lot of what he says, almost everything. We seem to be on the same page. So who better to have on a podcast interview than somebody that you already agree with? His name's Nathan Bryant. He's the owner of Auto Visions in Englewood, Colorado. He's been at this a long time, and he has very interesting takes on things. Nathan, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt.
All right. So we talked about all the good stuff before we started recording. So I'm not sure what's left, but I guess I would want to start out with something that I seen a response of yours. I think it was somebody talking about opening up a shop or the direction that they would want their shop to go. And your response I found really fascinating, because when you bought your shop and had ideas of what it would become, those ideas changed, or what it is isn't exactly what you set out to do. And I'm not implying that's a bad thing at all. I don't think you would either.
No, and I bought my shop about almost 6 years ago now, and I had this idea. It was already a Honda Toyota shop that I was purchasing, and I'm like, I figured, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get all the factory scan tools. I'm going to be programming modules. I'm going to be doing the high tech stuff, working on cool stuff. I'm going to be the go-to guy. And I purchased a tech stream, purchased a 1-year subscription. And that first year that I had it, I used it twice. That's it, twice. I would sometimes go a week and a half, 2 weeks without picking up a scan tool. What it turned out was that the customer base that I had and the customers that came back to me were people that maintained their vehicles. So their cars didn't break. I didn't have a bunch of tow-ins. And I found myself that what I was really doing was I was replacing struts and tie rod ends and brakes for soccer moms on Honda Pilots. Is a lot more profitable than I'm doing tough diagnostic jobs also. So yeah, what I thought I was going to do, didn't work out that way. About 2 years in, 2.5 years in, I was looking at credit card statements that were way higher than what my bank balance was. It wasn't exactly a great first 2 years for me. It forced me to really look at what was going well for me, what was going right, what wasn't working. And one of the first decisions I made was I don't need a yearly subscription to Honda Tech Info. I don't need a yearly subscription to Toyota anymore, because that's money I could better spend somewhere else. And basically I had to really kind of just check my own ego, and instead of trying to force the business into what I wanted it to be or what I thought it should be, accept it for what it was and take what was working well and concentrate on that and do that more. So before I bought my shop, I had managed a shop for, almost 10 years. So I felt like I had a really good understanding of how a shop works. It's still different when you're the owner. No matter how many classes you take, no matter how much training you have before you buy a shop, it's different when it's yours.
Would you say mostly psychologically, in that you have a lot or all your skin in the game, that weighs heavily on it, or is there something else that you noticed?
That's a big part of it, I think, is that I'm a big baseball fan, and they always talk about, a lot of times there's this pitcher that is really good in the 8th inning, and then he falls apart if you ask him to close the game and pitch in the 9th inning. Because there's something psychological about the guy could pitch in the 8th inning when he knew there was a safety net, when he knew that there would be somebody else that could come in and fix what he screwed up. If you're the manager, you're the general manager, even if you got an absentee owner, there's still somebody else that has a checkbook, and there's still somebody else that can basically tell you, no, don't do that. When you're the owner, you can make whatever dumb decision you want, and there's nobody to stop you. And I think that was a bigger issue for me than like the money aspect of it, because I actually was more stressed out when I was responsible for somebody else's money as a manager than I was with my own money. I think you can understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about what you were saying earlier, and, I don't own the shop, but I would say my ego and will, right or wrong, and I think you could make strong arguments on either end of that, is that I willed a lot of stuff into existence that, like you said, had the ideas of doing certain types of work. Well, that's what I wanted to do. So that's where I put all my energy into. And I think I lucked out that it's kind of worked out, but it could have backfired. It could have backfired bad.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not responsible really for the checking account. So, I was kind of gambling with someone else's money.
Yeah. And it's different. I mean, I don't really have an opinion on good or bad on it. It's just different. I started out as a tech, a service writer, as a manager. Now I'm an owner, and I've seen pretty much all the different sides of this industry by now. And it's, as you go from one job to another, things change. I wouldn't really say that they get easier or harder or better or worse. They just change. And I think that's something that gets lost on a lot of technicians, is that they don't understand the change that happens when you go from being the technician to being the service writer, when you go from being the service writer to the service manager, or when you go from being the technician to the owner, and then all of a sudden you're the technician, the service writer, the service manager, the janitor, the accounts receivable, the accounts payable, the bookkeeper, and the repairman. We were talking right before we started on the air. We were talking about how it seems like a lot of times technicians and owners and managers all wait until they're like really, really pissed before they go have a conversation with somebody that's bothering them. And I think a lot of that comes from they just don't see things from the other point of view. And
Yep.
How could you? I mean, if you haven't been on that side of the counter, you haven't been on that side of the counter. The same thing, like every once in a while, I had to get a windshield put in my loaner car the other day. And I got to experience the sticker shock that our customers get to experience when I pay $800 for a windshield, because it was a 2019 and it had to have ADAS calibration, and it had to have a higher quality glass than what you're used to putting into a 15-year-old Toyota. It's just, and it's good. It's good to see that. It's good to see the other side of the counter. It's good to see the other perspectives. I had an owner who, when I was managing for him, he said a lot of things that stuck with me, but one of them was, if it wouldn't put me out of business, I would put each technician up on the counter for a week, just so they know what you're dealing with customers, promises, and that end of it. But he was afraid with the technicians he'd have, they'd go tell somebody what they wanted to tell somebody. That wouldn't be good for the reviews.
Yeah. Before it's too late, I'm going to rattle this off. The Napa Expo will be held July 18th through the 21st at the Venetian Convention and Expo Center in Las Vegas. Stay on the forefront of the latest changes and technologies and industry trends. Registration opens April 2022. Not enrolled but interested in attending? Contact your servicing Napa store for more information. It reminds me of what you're saying is, this is way, way back when I first started, and I was just, a tech with a mouth. But one of our customers at the shop worked for a scale factory, like a weight scale factory. And he thought he worked behind a desk. He was more of an engineer, but that company, 1 week a year, you did somebody else's job. So an engineers got caught down on the, assembly line, and people on the assembly line ended up answering phones and trying to do engineering type work. Obviously they weren't engineers, so there's some stuff they couldn't do, but they had to, like you're saying, they had to try on some different shoes. They had to try some different footwear, different perspectives, and how they learned not just to respect the other positions, but also, like you're saying, a little bit of different perspective. You're sitting on the line. Well, why would they do this? This is so ridiculous. And now I got to go spend a week with an engineer. Okay, I see why they did that. That makes perfect sense. And then the engineer on the flip side down on the line going, why in the world did we do this? Why did I design it this way? This is pathetic. What am I doing? And they go back and they make changes. And I think I think it's fairly old plant in, I think it was a Ford factory in Brazil. And it's fairly automated, but everybody wears the same uniform. And at lunch, everybody is encouraged to not sit amongst their direct coworkers, but to mix it up and to kind of sit with people at different areas of the factory. And that would foster evolution of design, change the line completely, stuff like that. So I don't know. I agree. It would be hard to pull off in an auto shop, like a small auto shop. It'd be rough. I don't know how you could weather that financial storm.
Yeah. I remember as a dealer tech, I worked at one dealership. They would have a monthly luncheon for the whole dealership. Then you would end up with all the technicians at one table. All the salespeople would be at another table. Yep. And it would be the new car sales would be at one table. The used ar sales would be at another table. And then nobody liked parts. So they're
in an island.
And it was always, I'm sure somebody had an idea that they were going to bring everybody together and make the company more like a team, and it failed miserably. There wasn't actually any commitment to seeing anybody else's point of view or listening to anybody. It was just surface, and the boss would talk at you, and that was it. We were in the service department, and we'd grab some free food and go back to the shop. That was kind of our take on it. I think something like that could work, but it has to work with the right management, because there has to actually be a commitment to listening, and you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. I think if you're the management, you have to be willing to hear things that make you uncomfortable, and you have to be willing to. In my experience as an employee there wasn't very many owners or managers that were willing to do that. I owned my own shop because when I moved out here to Denver, I ended up not being able to find somebody that I was willing to work for. And to be fair, I think I hit a point in my life where I was never a very good employee, but I became less of a good employee. There was a post I saw today or yesterday, I think it was, and would it be a red flag on a resume if somebody's resume was a mile long and they only worked 4 months at a shop? Well, that was me through my entire 20s. And yeah, it's a red flag. But I don't know. I worked for some good people too. And obviously I'm still in this industry after 25 years, so I can't really say I got a lot more good than I do bad with it. I do think, I look at the lack of people that are coming into this industry, and I look at the lack of people that are staying in this industry. There's obviously some issues.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to sound overly pessimistic, and that's not, it's not doom and gloom. I think there's a lot of really bright things in the future, but I just find the biggest hurdle is the general value of the stuff that we service. That I feel is like a big hurdle that I don't know how to overcome. I haven't figured it out yet, short of continuously demonstrating the value of our services, or what we provide, charging as much as we can charge, and, giving the best service experience we possibly can. But man, you look at some of these other professions, the other service trades, if you will, when they're after one of your, best and brightest, and the stuff that they're working on, brand new or used, 15, 20 years old piece of equipment that is worth six figures, and it can't be replaced for less than six figures, they will spend the money much differently to service it and maintain it than somebody that's driving around something worth $10,000, $15,000 and can be replaced. I don't know about so much now with the shortages, but they can replace it rather quickly, and they can show up at a bank and get the money pretty much no problem. It's a hurdle. I'm not sure. I don't know.
No, there's a limit to it because we work on a depreciating asset and we work on a replaceable asset. Somebody's got an 18 or 20-year-old car's worth $2,000. We can write up an estimate for $6,000 and they can look at it and go, you know what? I'll take that $6,000. I'll put another $2,000 in it and I'll buy a 10-year-old car. And then the other thing that's always been a challenge in this industry is that if you have a customer base that can afford to pay high dollar repairs, that's the same customer base that can also afford to go buy a new car. So I think to some extent, we're our own worst enemies because we tend to look at things from our side of the counter. We don't look at it from the other side of the counter that much. So one of the reasons I became a mechanic was I was broke and I had to fix my own car. So for me, at that point in my life, it was, I'm not going to spend $100 to fix it. I can probably do it for 20. And you move on and you think about it. How many mechanics do you know that are cobbling together a 15 or an 18-year-old car that, the reason why they're doing it is because it costs them $300 and not $1,500. So we need to learn to look at it. It's not what we value our profession at. It's what does somebody else value the profession at. I will pay good money for people that can do things that I can't do. Web design, my lawyer, my accountant, these are people that could largely charge me just about anything they wanted because I can't do it. And if the only way that I have to judge whether I'm getting value or not is, is the IRS coming after me? Nope. I guess my accountant must have done a good job. And how do I judge price? Well, the only way I would be able to do it is to call 3 other accountants and get some estimates. And we handicap ourselves too often because we discount our value before we even let somebody else give them a chance to discount us. So, and then, I think the solution to that really is just, it's more training. It's more education. It's getting people it's getting techs that open shops into management classes. It's getting them to places like Vision where they're going to learn something, be taking a class from Cecil Bullard or Aaron Stokes or whoever. They're going to learn even more sitting at lunch with another shop owner. And I think that ultimately, the more training that the more people get, the better, the more professional the industry becomes, the better. And that's going to help solve some of our problems with technicians. I was listening to a person she's the head of Lincoln Tech, and she was saying that, you need to start talking to kids in the 6th grade about becoming auto mechanics. There's a ton of money that's being spent on promoting STEM classes right now. They're hitting these kids in 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, telling them to go to college and become engineers.
Yeah.
And we're I feel like our industry is always a little bit behind in a lot of that stuff. And we're like catching the leftovers when they're senior year in high school or when they're 20 years old and they've dropped out of college, as opposed to getting them on board, getting somebody excited about fixing cars before they can even drive one. But yet, it's a fun and exciting field. It's really is. I can't think of too many other jobs where you can go to work every day. You don't know what the day is going to be. You don't know what you're going to be working on. Even if you think you know what you're going to be working on, it doesn't work out that way.
Yep.
And there's always something new to learn. I was always attracted to the puzzle. I like to solve. So, and that's why, honestly, that's the only reason why I'm still in this field after 25 years is because the puzzle's still fascinating to me. Sitting in my shop right now, I have a 1991 Oldsmobile Cutlass and a 2021 Honda Civic.
Would that be a 3.3?
Yep, 3.3. It stalls when coming up to a stoplight after it's warm.
That was one of my favorite engines to work on. I don't know why. I think everything was easy to get to.
Yeah, I made a ton of money off those GM V6s. And the guy described, I don't usually work on cars that old, but it's a good customer of mine, and he described it, and he said, "Oh, it's coming up to a stop in a stall." I say, "Yeah, you need a torque converter solenoid."
Yeah, yeah.
Why? Because 20 years ago, I replaced 2 or 3 of those a month. It was just really, really common issue. But seeing the way the technology changes, going from when I started out doing drivability, that was feedback carburetors. Now, yesterday I did a 15,000 mile service on a Kia Niro electric vehicle.
Nice.
So the technology keeps changing, and the problems are fun. Solving the problems are fun. And I have to believe that if we can articulate that, and if we can get that across to 6th, 7th, 8th graders, maybe we get somebody excited about this. Because the job's not the same as it was 20 years ago. It's not anywhere near as dirty. It's not anywhere near as greasy. We need to be software engineers sometimes now.
The expo everyone has been waiting for is back. The 2022 Napa Expo is coming to the Venetian Convention and Expo Center in Las Vegas, Nevada from July 18th through the 21st. It promises to be the biggest and best Napa Expo yet. Gear up for 4 days of business building excitement, from general sessions and seminars to an enormous trade show that promises more suppliers, more space, and more products than ever before. It's all intended to help keep your business on the road to success. Industry experts will lead dozens of seminars throughout the day, and general sessions will feature speakers from a variety of backgrounds who encourage you to strive for excellence and inspire you to keep your eye on the end game. As for the trade show, with 200 Napa suppliers and 555,000 square feet of exhibition space, you will use every minute of the doubled trade show hours to see everything there is to see. Visit with Napa suppliers about new products and equipment, as well as the latest diagnostic and repair solutions. There will be areas dedicated to brakes, tools and equipment, heavy duty, and the Napa store and Napa Auto Care, making it easier for you to locate suppliers on the show floor. The Napa Auto Care booth will showcase the cornerstones of the Napa Auto Care program and its elements, including branding and marketing, employee solutions, business management and development, process improvements, and gold certification. In addition to business, there will be plenty of fun at the 2022 Napa Expo. The entertainment lineup includes country superstar Keith Urban, American rock band The Goo Goo Dolls, and the always entertaining Spazmatics, delivering the best songs and cool dance steps of the 80s. In addition to all the learning and networking opportunities, there will be an amazing lineup of prizes with a variety of vehicles, from ATVs and motorcycles to cars and trucks. For Auto Care Center owners, 2022 Napa Expo is a can't-miss event. If you are not a Napa Expo package holder and are interested in attending, contact your servicing Napa Auto Parts store. See you at the 2022 Napa Expo. I think that you'll hear people's techs or people in the profession that have been around a long time would say that years ago you would spend, for an example, 10 minutes diagnosing and 2-3 hours repairing, and nowadays in certain situations you end up spending like 3 hours to diagnose it to spend 10 minutes fixing it.
Yep.
And that the diagnosing or the analyzing could be a lot of research, what's going on? How is this supposed to work? What am I, coming up with a plan of attack? And then, like you said, I think the kind of the technology we get to use is pretty amazing. Then far too few know about it. I mean, if you want to get really critical about just the profession in general, how few know the technology available to them to use on vehicles or in their business. They maybe know that it exists, but don't consider bringing it on board. Anywhere from diagnostic stuff, service equipment, to shop management. Just either the shop management system itself, an add-on accessory with tablets for digital vehicle inspections, DVIs, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So many within our profession don't know about them or much about them. And that might be the ticket to, like you're saying, the 6th, 7th, 8th grader. If you're showing them like, this is the stuff we use day in and day out. And
yeah. And, like I said, to me, the key of everything is education. And we need to educate ourselves. We need to educate our own industry before people can go out and spread the word, so to speak. And I'm not, by no means am I the greatest example of this, because I'm still I've always been a pretty good drivability tech, but when it comes to things like scope patterns and stuff like that, I'm lost pretty quick. But so I kind of know where my limitations are on some of that, but I've always been good enough and able enough to figure out how the car is supposed to work. And then if I know how a system is supposed to work in my mind, then I can develop a test plan with whatever tools that I have or that I know how to use. And, maybe that needs to get out there too, that there's more than one way to do things. And, just if you can learn how a system works, if you can learn what it's supposed to do in the real world, then you can figure out what it's missing. And like I said, for me, I was always attracted to the puzzle.
Yep.
The whole thing for me was the puzzle. I started being a guy at the shop that rebuilt the carburetors at the first shop I worked at, because one guy took it apart, couldn't figure it out, and just left it on the bench. And I think I was 20 years old and fresh out of tech school, and kept walking by this thing day after day after day. And I was in between jobs, didn't really have anything to do. So I just started putting it back together. And boss came by and goes, "Is that right?" I said, "Think so." Kind of looks like I don't have any parts left over.
I say the same thing now.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that right? I think so.
Pulled it up to the old Ford truck and fired it up, and it ran. And next thing I know, I'm the carburetor specialist. It's the same thing now. Customer calls me, wants to know, "Hey, can you take care of my electric vehicle?" Yeah, I can do that.
Do you have a lot of corrosion out there?
No.
Okay.
No, we're rust free out here. I'll get one little bottle of acetylene and it'll last me for 5 years. Opposed to when I was working in Michigan or Pennsylvania and went through it in a week.
Because I think we're fairly close in age, and I caught the very tail end of carburation. I would get a few here and there. The Rochester,
the quadra-junks.
Yeah, both the quad and the dual, and then maybe a few Fords. I think I remember doing one thermal quad on a Chrysler. We didn't really mess too much with the Macunis. We had vehicles that had Ford variable Venturis, but I don't remember having to do anything with them.
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember rebuilding some of the Carter 1 barrels on the older Ford trucks.
Oh yeah, like on the 4.9. Yeah, I did a few of those.
And other than that, it was a lot of quadrajets. But like you said, the variable Venturi Fords, I guess they just didn't break. I remember one old Chrysler with a lean burn system that came in, and I punted on that one. I gave up. And older guy said, he goes, "Don't feel bad. Chrysler couldn't make it run right either." So, there was, and I think back on it's so much easier to fix cars now than what it was 20 years ago.
For the most part.
I mean, just the technology that's available to us for service information is, I mean, I was working on, this morning I was working on I got an 04 Mercury Marauder and the interior lights didn't work. And all of a sudden I'm looking at these wiring diagrams. I'm like, half the stuff isn't here. I'm looking at these diagrams going, because I'd gotten used to how much more thorough the service information is on 2012s, 2015s, 2018s. Like every wire is there, every pin is there. Yeah. And now I'm going back on this 18-year-old car and I'm looking at it, and the wiring color that's in the wiring diagram is not matching the wiring color that's in the car. And that just used to be a normal way of doing things. Even at the dealership. We were working at dealerships in the late 90s, early 2000s, and we would still have the racks of bookshelves. And if somebody printed an error, they didn't reprint the whole book. Maybe
they get that little sticker or something, right?
Yeah, or there'd be a couple of pages that were sent in, and it's this little thin thing that somebody lost. You were kind of, and that's probably part of the reason why I am the way I am now. With, if I can figure out how the system's supposed to work, I can figure out how to get to the bottom of it. Because a lot of what I learned even at the dealership, the information wasn't complete. And now it's, you just go through a flow chart now and wiring diagrams are where they're supposed to be. The ohms readings are what they're supposed to be. And the codes, the trouble codes, we have 10 times as many trouble codes that are so much more specific than what they used to be. Cylinder number 1 ignition coil fault is so much easier to diagnose than misfire.
Right.
But again, like I said, just the industry changes, the technology changes. And I still believe that if we could present things to kids at the right age in the right way, there's still kids out there that like to solve problems. They're still putting together puzzles. They're doing it in computer games now instead, but it's still the same. The psychology is still the same, I think. Again, yeah, I'm not that smart of a guy, so I don't really have the solution, but.
Well, because you're not fighting just the kid though. And I don't mean like fighting them to join, but the stigma with the parents.
That was the other thing that was mentioned, was that, you have to reach the kids younger, and you also have to make the pitch to the parents.
And it's not just auto repair. I think just the trades in general, unless the parents are like really big fans of dirty jobs, I don't know that they really push their children to, college if it needs it, or that's where their interest lies, that you're going to need that degree. But to push a kid towards one of the trades or an apprenticeship somewhere and learn whatever that may be, welding or electrician or, auto repair.
Yep.
They're not doing it, even though I think the evidence is overwhelming. That's where the jobs are.
Yeah, that's where the jobs are. And the money's pretty good if you're good at it.
Yeah, I think the money's good. And then, not that we're going to run into the COVID situation again, but we never stopped working. How many other people, their jobs, in some cases, their jobs got better, right? They stayed at home. They were making the same amount of money. And okay, I get it. But there's a lot of stuff where people didn't know what to do. They're at the mercy of assistance or, just getting by, white knuckling it until they could get back to work. That never happened for us. We kept working. I don't know if you got a little bit of a pause. I think we had a little bit of a pause of like a week as people kind of tried to figure stuff out, and then it was right back.
Yeah, when the initial lockdown hit here, my business it fell off the table for about 2 months. Laid him off. There's not enough work here for one person. There's certainly not enough for two. After 2 months, I brought him back, and we had 2020. I grew 30% over 2019.
Wow.
2021, I grew 30% over 2020. The reason why I dropped off for those first 2 months was pretty obvious. All of a sudden, my commute went from 25 minutes to 7. There was no cars on the road, and if nobody's driving, then nobody needs to go to the auto repair shop. Pretty simple in some ways. It was nice though driving home. Man, it was quick.
Oh, I bet.
Because
I don't know how you guys deal with it. I mean, seriously, I go hang out with friends in Chicago and they think nothing of that stop and go traffic. And I mean, maybe if I get stuck behind a tractor, then I gotta.
Yeah, I have pretty much bumper from the time I leave the shop till almost the time I get home every evening at 5:30. That's just the way it is. But yeah, it was kind of fun there when the first lockdown. I mean, I hit 90 miles an hour.
I didn't know the car went this fast.
Yeah, so the usual 25 to 30. But yeah, you're right. We are very much essential employees. We are an essential business, and it doesn't matter. COVID hits, we keep chugging. September 11th, 2001, September 12th, we were back at work, and there was never a hiccup back then. Doesn't matter, natural disaster. You know what? If the shop gets knocked down, yeah, you got to rebuild it, but the industry keeps going. People are going to keep driving.
You said something earlier about discomfort as an owner manager. One, you have the environment that, the quote unquote open door policy, but I don't know if that would work anyways. You know what I mean? Like, you can say it and it can be true. It can be 100% true. That door is open. You can come in and talk to me about anything, anytime. Maybe not anything, but issues. I don't know if it gets used.
My experience is it doesn't, but
yeah, and I have to agree with that. I think, just from employee's perspective, a lot of times you just build it up in your head about how this is going to go. Like, I have an issue with, whatever it is, my pay, and I'm going to go in. I want to talk about it, and I'm worried that it's just going to be like, yeah, you know what? You don't like it here? Go get another job. See if you can get paid what you get paid here somewhere else. And then having stuck in that decision, like, okay, do I quit? Do I go look? Or, I don't think it's ever come to that, ever. But usually you wait, and it builds up, and it builds up, and it builds up. And then either you get pulled into the office because of your attitude, your bad attitude, or you finally do decide to kick the door in and vent. And you had kind of hinted about something a little bit earlier about that, about the shop owner perspective of maybe waiting too long.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's just human nature. I think most people are not good with conflict. We avoid conflict as much as we can until, it builds up, it builds up, it builds up, it builds up. And then when you're going to have that conversation, you've been rehearsing it in your head for the last 2 days, because we all do it.
Oh yeah.
And, it never works it never goes the way you think it's going to go. But I think it's just human nature. I think it's the desire to avoid conflict until you literally can't anymore. And I think that the most effective managers and really the most effective people, they're comfortable with conflict. They can go have that hard conversation. They can go ask a hard question without it having to be a big blow up, without it having to kick the door down. I always think about it on the Facebook posts. I've got this technician, he's driving me nuts. He spends 20 minutes in the bathroom or 30 minutes in the bathroom. By the time you're venting on Facebook about a mechanic's bathroom time, that's not the real issue. There's a bunch of other things that have been building up and building up and building up. And you as the manager were too afraid to walk up to the technician at his toolbox and say, hey man, your hours have dropped by 25%. What's going on? And that's really, it's one thing to say I have an open door, where really I think it's the responsibility of the manager, because they're the one that has the power. It's up to them to walk out that door, out of their office, and initiate these conversations instead of waiting for the technician that comes in and says, I'm quitting. And you have to be comfortable. You have to be willing to hear something that you don't want to hear. Because if you walk out to that technician, you ask him, hey man, how come you left the greasy paw prints on this car? How come you did this? You have to be willing to hear that technician look back at you and say, it's because you did this, whatever this is. And then you have to be willing to accept that criticism. And then the really hard part comes in, because then you have to decide whether or not it's valid. Did I screw up? Did I favor Steve instead of Joe? Did I give Joe a job that I should have gave to Mark? How come I gave Mark 3 crappy jobs in a row? And, I managed one shop I had 6 techs. Another time I had 22.
Wow.
And when you have 6 techs and you're dispatching to work, you're going to screw somebody every once in a while. It's not intentional.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it is. But it's going to happen. And if you're really going to have that open door policy, and if you're really going to head off these issues, then you need to have that conversation beforehand. And you have to be able to say, oh, you know what? You're right. I screwed up. And that's hard for a lot of people. It's hard for technicians. Yeah. It's hard for service writers. It's hard for owners. It's hard for wives and husbands and kids. And it's hard for everybody. But if you can't have that conversation, if you can't accept that you own part of the problem, well, then you're just going to, the circle's just going to keep repeating. You're going to look at that technician. You're going to say, your toolbox has wheels on it. Get out of here. And then you're going to bring in the next one. And then 6 months later, or 9 months later, the process repeats. I had an uncle who had 3 ex-wives. My dad looked at me one time when I was a teenager and he said, it's probably, sometimes you need to look and see what the common denominator is. I don't think all 3 of those women were crazy. It might have been Uncle Marv.
Yeah.
And, if you're a manager and you're running through technicians, there's a good chance that you might be the problem. If you're a technician and you're running through shops, there's a good chance you might be the problem. It's hard. Like I said, to me, I really think it's human nature. And most people just aren't comfortable with conflict. It's the same thing at the service counter. It's hard to have that conversation with the customer. Oh yeah, we thought it might have been a spark plug. Nope, you need an engine. Or yeah, we went on a test drive. Your timing belt broke and bent all the valves. These are not easy conversations to have.
Yeah, it's the conflict. And then, like you're saying, the rebuttal, dealing with your shortcomings and managing those expectations, both sides managing expectations of keep picking on pay because it's easy. The technician finally either gets, we'll just say in this case, he or she gets pulled aside by the manager, the owner. What's going on, man? Hours are down or whatever. And it's like, geez, looking at cost of living increases, looking at so-and-so's making this, seeing some of these ads in the, whatever venue they're hiring at this, that, these signing bonuses. It's like, gosh, dang it. I'd like to make more. And then the shop owner responding, and not illogically either. Okay, but you're spending 20 minutes a day in the restroom. Your hours are dropping, not, they haven't plateaued. They're not improving. They're dropping. And now you as the one asking for more money have to process this and go, okay, how much of this is on me? And then, maybe another response by the shop owner would be, I need you to be more assertive. I was more of a self-starter. And that to me is an interesting response because maybe that's not the personality type. Now you're asking them to do something that's not really them, but that could be used as kind of hold them down a little bit. And I don't mean it so maliciously, like hold you down.
It kind of is, though.
I mean, but it's kind of that managing expectations, right?
Yep. And, this is where, we're back to clear lines of communication and managing expectations. What do I expect from you? What do you expect from me? And so many problems that I think that people run into, it's because they have the different expectations from the beginning. Or maybe the expectations were clear in the beginning, but then times change. Take pay. Right now, we're in a market where pay is going up rapidly. If I hired Frank at $80,000 a year 2 years ago or 3 years ago, that was great money. He was really happy. Everything was good. Well, now Frank's buddy, Fred, goes and he's got a job for 110. Now Frank's like, I'm getting screwed.
Yep.
And I'm sitting here like, you know what? You're still doing the same thing that you did for 80,000. I mean, you're not actually adding any value here. But that's being short-sighted on my part because it's not taking into account that the outside factors changed. You have to be able to, and it's easy, really, really, really easy to get kind of a tunnel vision of what's happening in our shop. And you can lose track of what's going on in the outside world sometimes. I knew it, going back to my days as a technician. I didn't realize that I was underpaid sometimes until I went and looked for another job.
Yeah.
Because you know what you know. It's what you know. And until it's that old phrase, you don't know what you don't know. Well, then all of a sudden when I found out that, oh, wait a minute, I can get $5 more an hour. And then I walk into the manager's office and say, hey, for the certifications I've got for what I'm doing, I'm worth this. And I actually had one manager look me in the eye one time and tell me I have never given a technician a raise.
Really?
You're on flat rate. You want to make more money? Go build more hours.
Oh.
I looked at him. I said, all right. I quit. Walked out. He goes, what do you mean you quit? I said, I quit. I'll work till the end of the week for you, but that's it. At which point he then yelled at me, you're fired. Like, all right. At that point in my life, I had a toolbox that could be loaded into the back of a pickup truck and backed my truck in there and loaded up at 2:30 in the afternoon and went home.
It's just an interesting response on his part because that you would think then there has to be some number, whether calculated or arbitrary, that they have set that if you hit, you're going to be making whatever amount of money. We'll just assume it's very good. But even if you're a stellar tech, you're going to hit a certain amount production and there's no more going up. You can't work faster. Or at least it can't ethically go up.
There's a plateau. There's a point where people are what they are. When I was at my peak as a flat rate tech, I was a 50 to 60 hour a week guy in a 40 hour week. Any more than that, mistakes got made. Now, as a one-man shop, 25 hours a week is my top.
Yeah.
Because, you got to answer the phones, you got to do all this other stuff. Yeah. And it's really hard to be efficient when you're going in 6 different directions. That's what I am. That's what I can do. So when I was a tech, and if I was at 55, I'm hitting my 55 to 60 hours a week. And if a manager tells me that, the only way I can get more money is to turn more hours, well, I'm left with 2 options at that point. One is 3 options. One is I can quit. I have to either, I almost don't even want to say this because it's so unethical, but it's a real world. I have to sharpen my pencil. Yep. And I have to either start finding in the dealer world, when you were dealing warranty time, there was always places where you could overlap, places where you could get extra dollars, whether it was ethical. Well, it's not whether it wasn't ethical, but you start tacking on labor ops, and then that's how you suddenly bill out 90 hours in a 40-hour week. Or you have to start just really, really concentrating entirely on speed and give up on quality, which means that when the car comes in for a check engine light and it's got a cylinder number 1 misfire, it needs plugs, wires, cap, rotor, fuel filter, fuel injection service. While we're here, we better service the transmission, the differential, and transfer case. Oh yeah, those brakes, they're down to 6 millimeters. We need to do those.
Yep.
And then now all of a sudden, now you can get up to that, that 80 hours a week again. That's bullshit.
I agree, especially if you're already producing a very acceptable level. And then that it sounds like it discounts the system's effect on those production hours. There's certain shops you're never, ever, ever going to break 40 hours. It cannot be done. You may be lucky to break 30 hours because the processes, the systems in place, the organization, whatever, is just never going to perpetuate that kind of production.
Right.
And then if they set the levels because they sat in a 20 group or went to a training class, that's like, no, your best tech should be turning out, 45, 55, whatever the number is, a week. Okay, well, here's the levels. And if you hit that, you're going to make, 6 figures a year. Oh yeah, you're never going to hit it. It's impossible. I guess I always struggle with that stuff. Maybe that's pessimistic on my part, that management doesn't always look at that portion. It's kind of like, here's the system that rewards this performance. Now it's up to you to do it.
Yeah. And this is the problem that I have with the flat rate system, is that it's always more. There's never enough. If you turn 60 hours, somebody wants 65. You turn 65, they want 70. And it shouldn't be like that. You should be able to go to work and know that, I'm going to work 40 hours and this is what I'm going to produce. And that should be it. And if somebody plateaus it, let's just say 40 hours a week, somebody's 100% efficient, then they should get a cost of living raise at the very minimum from one year to the next. They shouldn't be falling backwards by doing the same thing that they were doing. And yet that's what happens too often. And it's not just our industry. That happens all over all over the world. But that's one of the things. I mean, that's what makes people angry. That's what makes employees go look for another job. Is what makes people feel unappreciated when, and there's no reason for it. There's no, obviously the manager that I told the story about, that was kind of an extreme case, because that was shocking to me, and I'd already bounced around a few times. So I'm not quite sure what I would find shocking nowadays.
a big pile of pennies in your driveway.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, even that didn't really shock me. I worked at a dealership where the owner's kid broke in one night, stole the petty cash to buy cocaine. So
yeah, this shop, it was a dealership that I guess I would say interning or apprenticing at, because I was still in school. They were telling me a story about one New Year's Eve that there was a tech that they did not like. And after he left the New Year's Eve party, they screwed a grease zerk into his toolbox and filled that sucker up.
I've heard of that. I've never seen it.
I didn't get to see it. They just told me about it. And amongst many other things they had done, glued all the handsets to the phones. So the next working day, they were trying to answer the phone and they couldn't.
Yeah, and we wonder why people don't want to get into this industry.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's some of the stories are funny. A lot of them aren't, but a lot of characters.
I know, right?
I have one uncle who was a machine shop, another uncle who did construction, and my dad owned a liquor store. So, growing up, I always heard all kinds of crazy stories. My point of view is probably a little odd sometimes.
Wow. We just talked for an hour.
Yeah. I don't think we solved anything. No different than my day-to-day. Don't solve anything. But yeah, I really, really appreciate you coming on. I hope we can have you on again. Would be great. Yep. I'd be willing. Awesome. Well, take care. It's Nathan Bryant with Auto Visions, Englewood, Colorado. Well, thank you so very much, sir. Take it easy.
You've been listening to Matt Fonslow, diagnosing the aftermarket A to Z on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Matt on your favorite listening app. He's very interested in what you have to say. Let him know what you'd like him to cover and come on the show. Matt is all for advancing the aftermarket. Find Matt Fonslow on social media and connect or on aftermarketradionetwork.com.